Okay, let's unpack this. We have a deep dive today that takes you right into the heart of a major financial crisis, analyzed through a completely unfiltered lens. We are focusing on the transcription of a pretty high stakes conversation. It was between a well known cybersecurity personality, Alberto, and a seasoned risk management professional, Jason Snicker. They were discussing the fallout from a devastating attack on a major financial institution in Uruguay, what people called the BHU case.
That's right. And our mission here really is to dissect the profound disconnect that emerged. You had the official institutional statements on one side,
Yeah,
the corporate spin, you could say, and then you had the brutal digital reality uncovered in that discussion they had.
right.
So we're essentially using this conversation as a kind of masterclass in separating that carefully managed PR from, verifiable technical facts. For you, this analysis really reveals how public trust just erodes when institutions fail, not just technically, but ethically too.
And here is where the narrative tension truly lies, I think. We're examining how Alberto, who's positioned himself as this relentless government critic, a self-styled dissident, how he managed to fill the massive information vacuum that the institution's silence created.
Yeah, that vacuum is key.
We've got the technical receipts for the failure, and we also have his specific breakdown of the three-step methodology he claims the government uses to manage or maybe mismanage these critical crises.
So we really have to start with the facts of the attack itself as they were laid out and corroborated by the experts in that digital space in that conversation. The bank's initial official communication was designed to be incredibly soft, very reassuring. They claimed it was only a simple technical incident, but that language,
Well,
it was quickly exposed as completely misleading.
because the verifiable evidence showed this was far more complex and devastating. We are talking about a confirmed double extortion attack. This was carried out by the ransomware group Crypto24. They didn't just encrypt data, they successfully stole 700 gigabytes of highly specialized data.
And maybe we should clarify for a moment what double extortion means.
Yeah.
Because it's a really critical distinction here. It's not just holding systems hostage through encryption. That's, part one. The double part is the threat to actually leak the stolen data publicly if the ransom isn't paid.
Right, the exfiltration.
Exactly. And in this case, the 700 gigabytes stolen was specifically PII, personally identifiable information, belonging to mortgage holders. That is high-value, sensitive data, stuff with decades of potential identity theft risk attached.
Like context just changes everything, doesn't it? You've got this massive volume of sensitive traffic leaving the network. And Alberto used that really powerful metaphor describing it as being like an elephant escaping from the bank.
Yeah.
The sheer magnitude of 700 gigabytes of data leaving. That should have been an immediate screaming red flag for any security operations center, surely.
It absolutely should have been. And what's fascinating, or maybe alarming, is the implication there. Either the institution's detection systems were, non-functional, or maybe their internal processes for reacting to massive data leakage just weren't there. It points to them being either unwilling or simply incapable of self-correction or even basic transparency when the crisis actually hit.
And the conversation between Alberto and Jason Snicker really highlights how quickly that official minimized story just collapsed once the hackers followed through and, well, published the evidence. Snitker, the risk management professional in the chat, he noted the extreme incompetence shown by the response, especially when they tried to contain the breach.
Well, the most glaring technical failure they discussed was the decision to shut down all systems, which sounds drastic, right? But critically, they only did it after the 700 gigabyte had already been successfully stolen.
After the horse had bolted.
Precisely. Think about that decision. It suggests a catastrophic lack of network segmentation.
Okay, let's pause there, because network segmentation, that sounds technical, but it's key to understanding just how deep this failure went. What exactly does the lack of segmentation imply in a situation like this?
It implies that the bank's internal network was probably, flat, like one big open room.
Yeah.
In a properly segmented network, if one department or system gets breached, you can isolate it quickly. Think of it like closing a watertight door on a ship.
Okay, containment.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But when a total shutdown of all systems becomes necessary, it pretty much confirms Alberto's central thesis. The infrastructure was highly brittle. The moment the breach occurred in one area, it potentially had access to, everything else connected, including those systems holding all that sensitive PII. Shutting down everything wasn't a strategy. It was a move of absolute desperation. It confirmed containment was already impossible.
So the technical failure was just monumental, but that leads us directly to the ethical failure, doesn't it? Regarding the people who actually suffered the damage, the customers. If the bank failed the technical check so badly, how did they handle their ethical responsibility?
Poorly. Um, to put it mildly. The refusal to notify customers whose private information, whose savings, were now potentially compromised. That was the core ethical breach, according to the discussion. Both Alberto and Snitker seemed to agree. These customers had an absolute ethical right to be notified immediately.
Why? What should the notification achieve?
Well, not to panic them necessarily, but so they could take steps themselves, mitigate their own risk of identity theft or fraud proactively, change passwords, monitor accounts, but the bank chose silence instead.
And there's that darkly ironic twist in the narrative here, which Alberto was apparently quick to point out. The Crypto24 criminals, after their 72-hour ransom deadline expired, they actually honor their word by leaking the data publicly.
It's perverse, isn't it? The argument that came up was that the criminals, they operate on a predictable threat model, pay us or we leak. When they follow through, their actions, however malicious, are consistent, predictable.
Unlike the bank's actions.
Exactly. And that consistency stood in really stark contrast to the institution's unpredictable, unethical silence. Alberto basically suggested that in this specific scenario, the bank's behavior was actually less trustworthy than the known bad actors, which is quite a statement.
Wow, okay, that really sets the stage for Alberto's role as this dissident voice filling that vacuum we talked about. The discussion with Jason Snitker apparently reveals Alberto's specific methodology as a critic of the state security apparatus. He believes institutional failures like this BHU case follow a depressingly predictable playbook, a three-step pattern in crisis response.
Exactly. And this three-step process, as Alberto describes it, is focused entirely on managing optics, right? Not managing the actual problem.
So, step one, minimize the situation. Call it a technical incident, maybe a printer jam. Dismiss the scale of the theft entirely.
Step two, try to destroy the credibility of whoever exposes the truth. And since that source is often Alberto himself, he understands this step intimately. It's designed to make the public doubt the messenger, not the message. If people think the info is coming from someone biased or sensationalist, the actual facts can get sidelined.
Makes sense. And step three.
Stop talking about it completely. Just go silent and hope the 24-hour news cycle or the public's short attention span moves the story on, allowing the crisis to just fade from memory without any genuine accountability. It's an obfuscation playbook, perfected over time, he argues.
Right, but this is where we need to address the, let's say, the controversy around Alberto's approach too, right?
Right.
He justifies his strategy of maximalist public disclosure, often being the loudest, most extreme voice, by arguing that when the government is institutionally incapable of basic transparency, the dissident voice must be extreme to even be heard.
That's his justification, yes, filling the void left by official silence.
But doesn't that maximalist approach, that desire to be the first and loudest, risk sensationalizing the crisis, even if his core facts are right? Does the chaos he arguably introduces actually help manage the crisis for the average citizen?
That is the necessary tension, isn't it? And it came up in the discussion. He actually noted that his technique for calming people down is profoundly counterintuitive. He intentionally presents the absolute worst-case scenario right up front, like saying, all your money is gone, your bank account will disappear forever. Utter catastrophe.
Seriously.
Why? So that when the lesser, though still terrible reality is eventually revealed, it actually comes as a relief. It's psychological. He seems to view this as a functional, if maybe chaotic way, to manage panic by setting the bar for disaster as high as humanly possible right at the start.
It's a powerful tool and definitely a deliberate tactical move to force attention. The overall conversation gives you this fascinating window into a real-world conflict. You have one individual's hyperbole and dedication to accountability fueled, as sources suggest, by his own personal history and past run-ins for similar exposés, pitted directly against official sources who are consistently seen, at least by him and his followers, as actively working against the public interest through spin and delay.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, that dialogue between Alberto and Snitker really compels you, the listener, to consider the institutional implications. What happens when stability is prioritized over honesty? When national financial infrastructure is compromised like this and institutions choose opacity, they aren't just protecting their reputation in the short term, they are actively breeding distrust and, frankly, empowering those who challenge the system. Alberto's platform gains credibility precisely because the official narrative failed so fundamentally.
So what does this all mean for you? You've seen the anatomy of the cover-up here. The 700 gigabit elephant, the failure of network segmentation, the ethical breach of not telling customers. This entire deep dive has really been about the conflicting narratives that define a crisis like this.
And the sources, the discussion they had, it leaves us with a final provocative thought to consider. In a world where transparency is often sacrificed, maybe in the name of responsible crisis management, is the raw, sometimes chaotic, truth delivered by an anti-institutional voice like Alberto's, is that ultimately more useful for critical thinking and maybe even public safety than the polished fact-check narrative that attempts to hide the full catastrophe?
You have the data points now. The theft, the ethical breaches, the anatomy of that three-step cover-up playbook. Now, you get to weigh that necessary tension between stability and accountability in our digital age. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.